Dear friends, Carlton are playing finals football. Can you believe it? My prayers have been answered. I am at peace with the world. But in a win that held so much weight, was stressful, and thus meant so much because of the implications it had, the method we used to get this win can slip under the rug. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good win, I love a spirited fight back, and I love the resilience that kind of win demonstrates. But I'm going to be a bit of a buzzkill and send you back to the first quarter of this game. In typical Carlton supporter fashion, the first time I bag a team performance in about 10 weeks is when we secure our first finals berth in over 10 years. But it's within good reason. From our ridiculously good last quarter against the D's, we backed it up with a horrific start against the Suns. Despite defensively being the best team in the competition, we shipped off 41 points to the Suns, who hadn't scored that well in a first quarter all season. And whilst last week we also started the game scoring in single digits, at least in that game we dominated in about every category, scoring aside, against a good side setting the precedent. This game, we weren't even remotely close to breaking even and personified complacency and laziness. With finals secured, I think it's important to understand what we can't afford to do, as tougher competition is on the horizon. Today, we're going to break down our poor start. Let's go. Now, statistically, we were actually pretty even, maybe slightly disadvantaged in a number of areas. Obviously, this doesn't correlate with us getting annihilated in the first quarter, which is why I'm completely ignoring basically every stat and going off the eye test, bar a couple of areas. One of those is the inside 50s. By quarter's end, the inside 50 count was 19-8 Gold Coast's way, to which they were scoring at a 53% efficiency when going inside 50. The other was the marks inside 50, which sort of contributed to this efficiency. At quarter time, the Suns had 7 marks inside 50 to 0, and given the contested mark count was 3 apiece, that obviously says not all those marks inside 50 were earned. And the Suns are third worst over the course of the season for marks inside 50. So it's clear we've got a problem here. Reason for concern? Let's take a look. They say you live by the midfield, die by the midfield. And I'd say despite the backline getting rinsed, the midfield was largely to blame for these easy looks by the Suns. It majorly stems from work rate. Let's take this example. This mindset is right by the Blues, but in recent weeks, numbers would establish position more centrally and you'd have these numbers come to collect the footy. Right here, we've got 3 taking on, I'll say 5. And one of those is Mark Pitnet. Caleb Marchbank should not be drawing a man to handball to Pitto, who takes about 15 minutes to get the burners on. I'll just use Sard as an example. He should be helping support this chain and actually run into this space and at least hold that Suns player who's now impacting the play accountable. But the midfielders are basically nowhere to be found to at least even out the contest here. The kind of difference between the two sides is apparent on this example. You don't have them touching the footy, but Noah Anderson and Matt Rowell have tracked all the way back to goal. Make no mistake, we had slower movement to get it up there, but it's the concerted team effort to work hard higher up the ground to prevent that. There's this example where the ball moves a little bit quicker, but the Suns do well to slow this up higher up the ground. And because of that, you've got Flanders, Anderson, Rowell, Butterick, their winger at times, all involved as midfielders to escort the ball out. You can also see it here where the kick is essentially appealing to a 3-on-3. Charlie has it for about 5 seconds and probably was naive to not give it off to Martin, but you can see where our numbers are at. Far more interested in leaving a lot more work to too few. That was one glaring issue from the get-go. Imbalance. In the first 30 seconds, the play foreshadows what we've mentioned and what was to come. The Suns have got all these plays within a close radius, whilst the vast majority of ours have gone to the outside. And then the following ball up, you'll also see a couple of broken tackles. Talking about broken tackles, when we tried to collapse our numbers onto the Suns, they handled the heat pretty well. Once you breach that zone we were setting, issues can result for us. This was one concerted effort which fell flat, and once the Suns got an exit, you have Adam Sard zoning up as he usually would, but you've got Jack Lukosius, who's kicking more often than not, is practically like the Sam Flanders kick we'll talk about in a moment. We could have conceded a shot on goal here to renowned goal kicker David Swallow. And their quality roving of the footy as well was a pretty common trait of their first quarter. They would be sending it into that sweet spot, give or take a few meters top of the square, and really bringing Carlton's wingers into the game to play the kind of role they most definitely did not want to play. This is a very similar example. We've got 5 players on 2 within less than a meter of the footy. We're all so interested with the ball up that the minute the outlet is found, we're basically cooked, had it not been for a diving lunge. Had to say, watching this live, I was gobsmacked. Here's another example of imbalance where our numbers are all attacking, whilst the Suns have 4 sitting on their attacking side. You either win it and have a huge advantage, or you lose it and have a huge disadvantage. It's like a 4-on-2 here our way, but players like Newman, I'm clueless as to what he's doing. He could pick up Swallow here, he could get more defensive side. Too bad, he, like many others, were half asleep. And so, in the end, we have a 2-on-2, one of those is Cottrell who concedes the mark, and the Suns player down here also has 15 metres on the next nearest Carlton player. The Suns, through probably our own errors, exposed those defensive liabilities on the wingmen. That is exposing them to marking contests really close to the goal we're protecting, and also simply for the fact that they're attacking wingmen and will give you a little bit extra for your own path to goal. And this directly links to pace on the ball. It's well documented as per our success of the last few weeks, what happens when the footy moves around quickly. This is another example where the Suns, by virtue of eradicating our effect in close, and then using the full extent of the ground, pushing us to run constantly, means you've got this kind of exposure. This time, Holland's at the top of the square. This is the Flanders kick I was talking about. This laser kick means that you've still got Marchbank and Newman running, basically backs turned, still outside of our back 50, despite the footy being about 60 out. Means that the lead up by the Suns player here means Marchie has to make the conscious decision to pick who his assignment is, with Newman not really engaged. And because it's a pretty non-committal, hesitant kind of approach, there's more space over the back for Sam Flanders to chip the ball into. Given Rosas is running with the ball and Sardi is running against it, it's a pretty easy bypass. This goal we conceded. Players here, as a part of the zone, should be getting behind the football, so then players like these can occupy space further up, so then you don't have players like Cottrell having to press up and leave his man open in a paddock all the way up top. Even still, I have no idea why he's here. Maybe it's to provide that dump kick option, but that doesn't really make sense because even with Fish up here, Newman is over here ready to get that kind of kick. Thus, you're taking a heavy gamble. Because of that ineptitude to just be disciplined and be a little bit more reactive as to what's going on earlier in the play and in the present, it allows an easy rove and thus an advancement to get it to that man in acres of space. This goal we also conceded through that weapon of Lukosius we mentioned earlier. It's very similar to that Rosas goal in the sense a thumping kick led to a mark, and even with a marginal amount of time, the Blues can't get back. The Suns are goal side, and it's that chip that complements the run forward, which means on this occasion, Fiorini can break through a tackle attempt with Newman coming the other way. And because of that Newman commitment, and Blues players still trailing, Sard, the nearest, must go over to try and halt the Suns, whilst leaving his man open on the outskirts. The man who is ultimately used as the crucial piece of the puzzle to convert from a beneficial chain of possession. We know that Carlton like to come up to the stoppage with a half-back, and Gold Coast were wanting this challenge because they at clearance were trying this really forward-thinking strategy that promotes a Sun to come up to the ball. Whether they get it or not, It simply means Carlton's halfback flankers actually have to defend rather than being able to manipulate the opposition as they attack. So we couldn't really get any thrust from stoppages that we usually would. This is just a random play I find funny where David Swallow actually uses the umpire for a block to free himself up from Sardi. On the offensive side, majority of our kicks didn't even bypass our forward. So whilst we were getting a decent amount of footy, it wasn't really in a really threatening attacking kind of area. The lack of inside 50s were a byproduct of the Suns being comfortable with the plan they'd set and executing it. We were just breaking down, bringing the ball forward, and really playing closely to the line. Or if we weren't doing that, we were kicking to those kind of marking contests that don't benefit Charlie whatsoever. And obviously, with the scoreline becoming more out of hand by the second, we had players like Jesse Motlop coming into the back line to compensate for us being outworked by Suns wave. And so this meant those problems higher up the ground continued to culminate, with less representation at ground level to rove those contests that Charlie struggled to win early. And obviously, if you can win those kind of contests up the ground, you take the pressure off your back line. And that would have been awfully handy, especially with the inside 50 disparity. Look, I think this sort of sums up the first. A fluent attack, halted by a forward 50 kick that was the exact kind of kick the Suns were prepared to give up. Primarily because the kick was tough to execute, went into a low percentage spot with a pretty low percentage of even getting our hands on the ball. The Suns remained measured in their ways getting out of the back 50, and their superior intensity meant Carlton's forward half pressure was always going to fall short. A couple of broken tackles by Took as he bulldozes his way forward, and there's that imbalance of collapsing and getting sucked into the contest and not maintaining an even spread. So when the kick gets out, Carlton are chasing tail, like this example where the outnumber is apparent. And because of that, it means there's an opportunity for a sublime kick like this one. Probably not intended for Swallow, but over the head of the key position players, so he can run onto it and mark it uncontested. Overall, you could credit Carlton's first quarter garbage to a lot of things, but to put it simply, this team was half asleep. In contest, they weren't structured. Intensity-wise, they didn't match. And because of that, their work rate looked worse than it actually was. In reality, the way the Suns were moving the ball, partially due to the poorly facilitated effort by the Blues at the contest, meant defenders were always going to be in a vulnerable spot, no matter how good the personnel is in the back line, and no matter how hard you run. But sure, there were definitely instances where the work rate was something that definitely made a handful of Carlton supporters reach for the remote and turn off the TV. So the lesson here is Carlton, a game that starts at 2:10 does not mean you start at 2:45. So there you have it. Whilst it's important that we were able to get back into the game and score the crucial 4 points, thank you very much, Charlie Curnow, it is just as important that we don't ignore what preceded it. Obviously, the job is not done yet, with plenty of football to play. And a part of that job is rectifying the issues of our poor start and ensuring such an occurrence was the last of its kind for this season. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for supporting in recent times. We will see you for the analysis of the final fixture in our home and away season against the Giants. Cannot believe finals is around the corner. It's really snuck up on us, but I cannot wait. Thanks again, and bye for now.